Hello and good day, everyone. My name is Mahnaz Harrison, founding president and CEO of Last Mile4D. I have the honor of moderating this session, as well as presenting to you our work in Kenya using VPAC for Development, V4D, in this session. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this NGO CSW 66 forum. Before we start, I have some housekeeping items to share with you. This session will not be live streamed, but will be recorded and posted on Last Mile4D YouTube channel. You are all muted. Please use chat to pose your questions, and we hope to get to all of them. We will field the questions and answers at the end of the session. Without further ado, allow me to introduce our speakers. Immediately after I speak, Heather Marlow, Senior Research Scientist at the International Center for Research on Women, and then Cheryl Thomas, Founding Director of Global Rights for Women, will speak. Catherine Menganyi, the dynamic community activist who was supposed to speak today, is mourning the loss of her daughter because of a road accident 2 nights ago, and will not be joining us. Our sincere condolences to her and her family. Our hearts go to her. Another FGM survivor and activist, Susan Alukulem-Krop, who is the chair of another CBO and leads our team in West Pokot, is sharing her FGM suffering story this morning with us. You will hear voice of Caroline Chegech telling Susan's story in English. Allow me to start. So our organization is called Last Mile4D. Who we are. It's a woman-founded nonprofit that has been in operation since 2014, and we're located in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to ensure women and girls have access to information about their health, safety, and freedom from gender-based violence, with the focus on female genital mutilation. What I want to do is share the screen with you, because what is happening is I will have some statistics and data, and therefore I would need to share my screen with you. So I mentioned to you that our mission is to ensure women and girls have access to information about their health, safety, and freedom from gender-based violence, with the focus on female genital mutilation. Our focus and the pilot project we're going to be sharing with you is totally focused on FGM. I'm certain many of you do know what female genital mutilation, FGM, is, but as a background, intentional altering or injury of the female genitals for non-medical reasons. It causes significant physical and psychological health issues. It's prerequisite to child marriage in some communities. #1 cause of school dropout, reducing girls' chances for socioeconomic improvements. And it's a global problem that occurs to 3 million girls a year. This is 10 every second. The rationale for targeting eradication in West Kenya is basically up to 70% of the Kenyan women in that area have experienced FGM. Government of Kenya, President Kenyatta, supports eradication of FGM, and Kenyan national laws prohibit FGM. FGM continues persisting in the last mile communities, and we all know that it's not mandated or endorsed by any local religion. So what we did, our pilot project was funded by Grand Challenges Canada. We worked with local partners, Child Life and the CISO initially. We use VPAC for development, V4D, to do our work. We enrolled 1,000 girls and 400 boys from 10 schools in our pilot project. We deployed 9 educational modules in the schools. We gave girls a voice and brought awareness to 4,000 community members. How did we do this? Our approach is a multi-pronged approach, and we basically use community-centered training, education modules that talked about harms of FGM, illegality of it, myths about FGM, and so on. And we also outreach to the entire stakeholders and community elders in the area that we worked. We use technology, which is solar charged laptop and a custom data collection platform that permitted us to use real data to input and communicate with each other. Data acquisition and analysis was done by trained surveyors, and the continuous data analysis allowed us on a real-time basis to establish a baseline and then adapt our procedures and our approach as the data dictated, and we also watch project impact tracking. Fgm Eradication Project top lines. You're looking at the first outreach that we did for the community, reported that FGM did not exist. The community leaders told us there is no FGM in this community. But then when we showed them the data, real time and live, they realized that that data coming from the girls contradicted their own belief. That basically galvanized the community around what we were doing. As a result, we managed to really inform more than 4,000 parents in the area about FGM and asking them to help us eradicate that practice. 97% of the parents who came to our sessions signed declaration forms that they will not be cutting their girls. And 92% of parents agreed actually to act as volunteers to go out to the community and speak out against eradication of FGM. Well, this basically led into the 1,000 girls that were enrolled in the project did not suffer FGM. 95% uncut girls no longer feared cutting. At-risk girls felt confident speaking up against it and or knowing what to do should they fear FGM. 99% of them knew exactly how to convince their parents. There are still a few that might be in danger, but they are in close communication with our community field workers. In conclusions from the Fgm Eradication Project, we could basically say that it's not showing me the top of this. We met the project goals, and that meant the community education brought awareness about FGM and its harm and provided solution to the girls. We gave them their voice. Regular contact by our trained surveyors and community field workers with the girls gave girls power and facilitated intervention at the critical point, allowing the girls to remain at school and not be cut. We had to actually set up shelters at times of the cutting. Our project has gone thus far through 3 cutting seasons, and so the shelters were necessary during the cutting season to really help those that were in serious danger of being cut to be rescued. Our project demonstrated strength of the 3-pronged approach and allowed us also to learn from our mistake and allowed us to adapt to real time. So if we learned that a girl is going to be in danger, we knew it immediately and we were able to actually rescue them right away. And we're really eager to scale up our project or replicate it. And this is easily replicated, and we can go beyond the Western Kenya that we are in. We're already also in WESPA code, but we want to go beyond Kenya, not only cover Kenya, but get to the neighboring countries, which basically have 25% of the rate of FGM in the world. And the platform that we use can easily be used for other public health issues, for example, HIV or rape or any other issues that can be related to gender-based violence or otherwise. With that, I will thank all of you for joining this particular session, and allow me to ask Heather to join us to present her section.
Let me go ahead and pull up my slides. So Mahnaz, if you could stop sharing, and then I can share.
In just 1 second.
Okay.
You're on.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Heather Marlow. I'm a senior research scientist at the International Center for Research on Women. I work out of our DC office. However, we also have researchers in our Nairobi and Kampala offices also working on FGM research who weren't able to join us today, but are participating in other CSW events, including a Women's Economic Empowerment Symposium tomorrow morning, if you're interested. So I had the pleasure of working with the Last Mile4D staff to analyze data from this pilot project. And so I'll be presenting some of the top level findings, but then also some findings of the data analysis over time. So some of this Mahnaz had mentioned that V4D was piloted in 10 schools in Korea between 2019 and 2021. And the staff members were monitoring over 1,000 girls ages 9 to 17 enrolled in the program over the period of 18 months. So through the VPAC technology, they collected online survey data from girls, boys, and community members. So these were the data that I was able to look at with my team. And the program monitoring information was collected at 3 times during 2020, with some additional questions added related to COVID in the last round of surveys. So what we did was to categorize the girls using a series of questions to determine their level of risk for near-term FGM. We also looked at the data over time using generalized estimating equations, which is a regression model, if you're familiar with that, which can control for the demographic factors that might influence some of the outcomes that we looked at, and also some chi-squared tests to look at differences between baseline and endline. So as Mahnaz had presented, 9% of girls had already been cut. And I think that these findings surprised some community members when they were then presented back. I think one thing that was wonderful about the model was the real-time data collection and constant sharing of what was happening in the community to base it on actual data in real time, which I think really had the advantage of sort of showing what was happening throughout the program. And as Mahnaz had mentioned, being able to adjust even some of the questions, and also presenting the data back to the community to reflect on and discuss, I think was really powerful. And as you can see, based on a question of whether girls feared whether they would be cut at that particular survey point, 60% of the girls, or about 600 out of 1,000, said feared they would be cut. As Mahnaz mentioned, part of the program engaged all different types of community stakeholders, and I think had mentioned, engaging parents, working with mothers of girls as well as fathers, and many of them, after the educational sessions that they received, declared that they would not cut their daughters. And of the 4,000 parents, authorities, leaders, and others participating in the program, based on a series of questions at endline around knowledge and attitudes about FGM, many of the participants had improved their level of knowledge from baseline to endline in terms of girls' rights, the laws in Kenya, and just their thoughts about FGM in their community, or whether to have their daughters undergo FGM. So from a basic baseline to end line data, we saw that girls' confidence increased. I think Mahnaz had mentioned this from baseline to end line, from 46% to 99%. Their confidence to speak out about FGM for themselves. And the number of girls who knew what to do if at risk of FGM also increased from baseline to end line. And as Mahnaz had mentioned, no girls were cut during the pilot program. So we further categorized the girls enrolled in the program based on a question about their level of confidence about whether they would be cut at the 3 different time points. So we categorized girls in one category as green, if that at that time point they did not think that they would be cut anytime soon. Girls as a red category because they feared being cut at 1 or more of the 3 time points. And girls in a white category for those who had already undergone FGM before the program began, the 9%. And then what we did was to compare the green girls to the red girls in a regression model, and looking at their level of confidence about whether they were going to be cut, and several outcomes about whether they're confident about speaking up about FGM, whether they're able to convince their parents not to cut them, and knowing what to do if they could not convince their parents. So what we found in these models, so these models control other potential confounding factors that could influence the outcome. So we controlled for their school, for their age, whether their sister had been already undergone FGM. And just to note that many of the girls in the red category had already had a sister who had undergone FGM. So I think that's an important thing to pay attention to. So in these regression models, if you're interested, I can send you our research brief, which has the odds ratios if you're a researcher and want to look a little bit more in detail at the models. We found that the girls in the red group are actually half as likely to report being confident about speaking up about FGM compared to the green group of girls. And that girls in the green group were 4 times more likely to believe that they could convince their parents not to cut them compared to girls in the red group. And finally, that girls in the green group were twice as likely to believe that they knew what to do to avoid FGM if they couldn't convince their parents. So what stands out for me, and I think merits further research, what distinguishes the girls in the green group from the red group? Is it, more exposure to or more absorption of and empowerment within the program that they participated in, or something else? So I think thinking a bit more about the red group in particular, and because this is a real-time monitoring system, how do you then work with girls identified in the red group to understand their specific circumstances to help them reach that level of confidence, or to work with their parents and community. And then this last figure shows just the graphs of the red and green groups from baseline to midline to endline data. And you can see that all groups rose in confidence by endline in terms of their confidence of speaking up against FGM, ability to convince their parents, and knowing what to do if they're fearing being undergoing FGM. So really, to conclude, I think these data are really important. They're real-time data that captured the ongoing risk of FGM over time. They were actionable data. It was data that the community could own and use and discuss and think about. I think something that we often don't have in many programs. We wait till the end to see what happened, but I think the advantage of the V4D model is that you have this real data and you're monitoring the girls over time. And this likely allowed girls to stay in school for another year, and also points to the importance of monitoring girls over a longer period of time. So the pilot was for a year and a half, and yes, we prevented FGM potentially for 1 season, but what happens in the future? Because girls, can undergo FGM during a very a number of years in their early childhood and or adolescence. So just some things to think about, and hopefully you enjoyed this, and we're happy to share the link to the brief so you can read it. And it has a little bit more details about what I presented. And I look forward to any questions that you have at the end. Thank you. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. And for all the participants, please know that you could post your questions in the chat, and we look forward to fielding them at the end of the presentations. And at this point, I'd like to invite Cheryl Thomas, the Director of Global Rights for Women, to join us.
Hello, everyone. It's my honor to be here. Thank you so much, Mahnaz, and Heather. Thank you so much for presenting that important research. First, let me introduce myself. I'm the Executive Director of Global Rights for Women, and we are based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we do work on legal and systemic reform at the invitation of partners around the world, and then also here at home. And I think Mahnaz is going, there we go, that's the end of it. So we'll get to the beginning of those slides here in a minute. I'll just keep talking. And also I am going to put in the chat a link to the Prohibition Against Female Genital Mutilation Act in Kenya. So that those of you who are interested in reading it, it's very interesting, I found, and has some very serious accountability measures in it that I'll be talking about generally when it comes to violence against women laws. So as I said, Global Rights for Women's mission, we can go on to that, is to work with leaders around the world to advance women and girls' human right to be free from violence through legal, institutional, and social change. We feel that while we're lawyers on our staff and we work with lawyers in other countries, we cannot leave the community, the institutional and social change advocates out of this picture, because laws cannot stand on their own. They need a whole community a response and buy-in and ownership. We focus on violence against women and legal reform, and we prioritize private violence, so such as domestic violence, FGM, the sexual violence that occurs in private, because that is the type of violence that is most prevalent in the world. This slide you see here are just examples of places that we have worked to, at the invitation of the advocacy groups there. This work can't be done without that ownership, leadership, and we get involved, as I said, as we are invited by partners around the world. These are places where I personally have worked with advocates and legal professionals in drafting first the laws on violence against women that they initiated, in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So that has been a great honor to do that with folks around the world. And it's a really, important point that this has happened really in most of our lifetimes, where countries around the world have drafted their first laws on violence against women and girls, and in particular, laws that address that private violence. So our view at Global Rights for Women is, if we could just go back once, that's fine, actually, Mahnaz, that's just fine, no worries. The laws are the signal that we as communities are ready to disrupt the power imbalances between men and women and girls. And then what happens next is the enforcement of those laws. As I mentioned, the 2011 Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act in Kenya is strong on that accountability. Part 4 criminalizes FGM. And it's very interesting. If the girl dies as a result of the FGM, the offender can receive life imprisonment. So very strong on that. And also criminalizes the aiding and abetting of the FGM and the those who might bring girls into Kenya for FGM, and those who would take her out of the country to have that practice performed on her, that brutality, I should say, performed on her. So I'm going to talk right now generally about the enforcement of violence against women laws. That is what Mahnaz has asked me to speak to. This has been, as we have seen so many laws being passed around the world to address all forms of violence against women. And just to say, it is our belief that all these forms are connected. They are manifestations of historically unequal power relationships between men and women. I think Linda McDonald put in the chat there maybe the statement from the United Nations back in 1993, which is exactly that violence against women in all its forms, whether it's domestic violence or sexual assault, FGM, all kinds of other harmful practices. Those are a manifestation of the historically unequal power relationships between men and women. And as I said, that's what laws begin to address, signal that we are going to disrupt this power imbalance. And then that enforcement is what gives those laws teeth. We see here the former Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, Rashida Manjoo. Her term ended, I think it was recently, but her research and visiting countries around the world throughout her tenure as Special Rapporteur allowed her to understand and then write very powerfully about how, though so many of these laws have been passed, and that is so necessary and such a critical component of effectively addressing violence against women, the lack of accountability for violations that is intended and envisioned by these laws is still not happening. So in fact, Rashida Manjoo was the leader in calling for a global treaty to hold governments accountable for enforcing their laws on violence against women, such as Kenya's FGM law, but to make sure that the laws aren't there just sitting on the books, that a global treaty is another way at another level to have accountability for, at this level, it's the governments to enforce the laws against the offenders. So I always think of criminal laws like the anti-FGM law in Kenya as a human rights law. It's a law that promotes women's and girls' human right to be free from violence. Be sure to give me a warning, Mahnaz, if I'm going over too long. I think I have about 5-10 minutes left, but I'm always happy to receive those warnings. So these principles here are, just a tiny piece. We could talk for days, honestly, about what makes violence against women and girls laws effective. And when I say effective, I'm really talking about the 2 bullet points here. If they are effective, if they prioritize victim safety and equality, and they prioritize offender accountability. And you'd be surprised, actually. You think of violence against women laws drafted and passed, certainly those would just naturally, intuitively be front and center in the laws. not always the case. We have seen in our work laws, not just a few, many laws that prioritize other aspects that profess to be anti-violence laws, but it actually may even be entitled. The law to protect the family, the law to preserve the family, the law for family peace, that kind of language. And of course, those kinds of goals can be in direct contradiction to the safety of the victims, the equality of the victims, and the accountabilities of the offender. So that last bullet point there, I just can't stress enough. If the language of the laws really reflect this principle of a community vision that consistently reinforces women and girls' human right to be free from violence, that then gives the enforcers, the stakeholders, the legal system, first, it allows them to be sending a message about that. It engages, it sets the stage for engagement of community agencies, not just the legal system, but in every aspect, whether it's a medical clinic, a school, a social services agency. We're all in line now with the declaration of our new law, setting this new community norm that women and girls' human right to be free from violence, free from FGM, free from private violence in all its forms, which has been so really just entrenched in all our systems around the world. Domestic violence, as I say, sexual assault, and entrenched in the cultures. As we really get on the same page about that with first the language of the laws, then it will lead to more likely effective enforcement. So if we can move to the next slide there. Oh, there we go. To enable effective enforcement, the language of the laws must, and of course, again, just the key components of enforcement, I'm sorry. There we go. The key components of enforcement are another subject that we could talk about for many hours, but I have presented to you here what we see really as key factors that are either present or not present when we're looking at laws that are working versus laws that are not working. So just 4 observations I have made. I think I mentioned at the beginning, maybe I didn't say the exact time period. I've been working since 1992 with partners to draft these laws. So we've had some real opportunities to watch communities as they first make these statements through the laws and then attempt to give them teeth through enforcement. And these are just really key components that we see have such a determination of whether those laws are effective. So this, oh good, Linda, I see questions there, and we'll definitely have time to answer those. So prioritize the role of victim advocates and survivor voices in all planning efforts. And this really should be started with the drafting of the law itself. We have seen over and over again in our work how laws are often drafted within the legal system, within judiciary, law enforcement, prosecutor working groups, and the advocates, those who are closest to the victims themselves, may be left out, and those who are, and the survivors' voices themselves may be left out. That won't work. We need to be talking with survivors or if not, that's not safe, and there are ways to do that safely. Global Rights for Women is actually working on a publication about that as we speak. So that is critical. Attend to the needs of marginalized, disabled, and minority women is also critical. We see that left out all the time. So in places where there are women of color, populations of immigrants, marginalized, disabled, LGBTQ, those voices must come to the table. And if they do, you end up with a result that actually is much broader than if those marginalized groups of populations have access to justice, that enables access to justice for the mainstream and more privileged populations. Absolutely critical is the next point: develop a model for interagency coordination. And that actually, it's interesting. I don't know if it's being used this way. Heather and Mahnaz will be able to talk about that more, but right in the FGM, anti-FGM law in Kenya, there is a board, anti-FGM board. So that could be a platform or a space for developing a model for interagency coordination. And I know that your project, Mahnaz, has done a lot of that, just reading about it. But without that, a law cannot stand on its own with one or another sector responsible for enforcing it. That law has to be enforced with a community engagement that is planned and intentional, and as the fourth bullet point there reflects, ensures ongoing monitoring by civil society of the implementation of that law, because as we have seen, there are always unintended consequences of laws that are intended to protect women's safety and hold offenders accountable. They're always, and unless the civil society groups are monitoring those laws and seeing what those unintended consequences or even failures or gaps, and constantly working to amend, refine, strengthen, and improve those laws, the laws may even become tools for further oppression against women and girls, and particularly marginalized groups. In Minnesota, we created a model called the Coordinated Community Response about 40 years ago. It's called the Duluth model of CCR, and we have been fortunate in Duluth to just refine that tool over many years, and it has been hugely successful and a model throughout the world in the effective enforcement of, in particular, domestic violence laws. But as I say, it is a need for the enforcement of all kinds of laws. So I think I'm getting to the end of my time here. And I just wanted to end by, since there's really so little time to dig into the details of how to write and enforce effective laws on violence against women, there are, unlike 30 years ago when I started in this field, there are wonderful resources now, all kinds of resources about practically how we do this. This is a handbook for legislation on violence against women published by the UN long time ago, but still hugely relevant, particularly for countries that are just starting their enforcement and really digging into the enforcement of their laws that may have been on the books for a while, like the anti-FGM law in Kenya. The next resource there that I have on the next slide, Mahnaz, if we could go to that, is the United Nations Virtual Knowledge Center to End Violence Against Women and Girls. We at Global Rights for Women drafted, or were part of, with others, drafting the coordination section of that center. The organization I worked at before Global Rights for Women, the Advocates for Human Rights here in Minneapolis, drafted the legislation section of that. So there's lots of information about implementation, access to justice, and how to make it work through coordination on that. And then the next slide there, I will end with is the essential services package is a much more recent tool. So the United Nations has been on top of watching the evolution of anti-violence laws and assimilating good practices and best practices and long-standing tested strategies to end violence against women. And this is another wonderful resource, practical guidance on coordination and implementation. Again, I just keep saying coordination. That is how we effectively enforce violence against women laws. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much. And I will very much appreciate your questions.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. This was really a wonderful presentation. I greatly appreciate what you said. And as I mentioned earlier, the survivor that we were hoping that she would speak to us today has lost her daughter 2 nights ago. So our hearts go out to her, and we have asked another friend, colleague, and teammate to do that work. So as I said earlier, it's more than likely. Okay, so we have had technical problems into getting the voice of the person from Kenya over to us. Just give 1 second here, and I think they tried to get to a different location, but I don't think that we managed to do that yet. One has arrived, one has not. Susan, I understand that you will speak on your own. I'm here to support you anytime you want to. And then go ahead, tell us your story, please. Introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Susan Alukulem. I am a woman for 5 children, 3 girls, 2 girls and 3 boys. I myself, I went to Fgm when I was 13 years old. And then I stayed for almost 2 years. After being married, I married with a husband with 38 years. My husband is 38 when I was 13 years. Before that, when I was being cut, I get very painful. I was tortured. Even when they cut me, all the clitoris type 3. I was chopped. And when I was get pain, you know, in a culture, when you say you get pain, they will not agree, because that is a culture, mean of culture. So after that, when I was married, when I get there with the children, when after birth, you know, in our community, when you birth that time, no hospital there. We don't have any hospital. The midwife were, when I get birth, the midwife used to help me to birth, but almost a week I was being pained when I get the pregnancy. When I want to birth. So when a child want to come out, where the scar, they try to cut. They cut very painful. I get very painful when I was birth. Even I used to cry. because the scar become a stick. The scar was being tightening. So even now, when I say this way, my firstborn child, my second-born child, I was being cut, the same scar. For my last born child, the girl, I was get my leg. I get instructions in my leg. I was not walking now properly because of this. The child bush when he was bushing, and the midwife was far from me. So when the child bushing, I push the child somewhere crack. So that is the pain I have. Even now, when I was walking, I have my leg was not worked properly. Even now, when I was talking, when I remember, I myself, when I remember the painful I caught it, really, I was getting when I was remembering when I get it, that one, I am not happy. So I knew everyone, the girls. When I say no to FGM to our girls, I know the pain. I was painful. When I say no to FGM, I was the one. I am survivor of FGM. When I was talking like this, I am a survivor, and I am not here to say no to FGM to anybody else. Even when I was saying no to FGM, I was a courageous when I talk it. Even front of the administration, the community, I was a courageous to say I'm the one. I am a survivor, because many of girls, like 7 of girls I know were died because of FGM. They bleed. It was 2017. They bleed up to that evening hours. So I know this one is I myself, it was painful when I say so. In Pokot community, many girls facing the same challenge like me. And because of illiteracy, when you see me, I was talking like this. Maybe I talk a broken English, but I'm trying my best. You know, the first, I went up to class 8, and when I was cut, I was being married when I was 13 years. Imagine. And I knew the old girls, our girls in our community, they were facing the same problem like me. So when I was talking like this, I know in our community, you know, in our community, when a girl, when FGM, really you are saying, I am not enough to be married. But many of them were married when were underage, were still underage. 12 years, was cut when was 9 years, married when was 9 years, 12 years to 13 years. That is a maximum in our community. And it was really painful for us who are survivors for FGM. When you see a girl who was cut and being married by a man for 60 years, you get painful. When I was talking like this, there was many girls who are running to my home. I have 5 girls to 7 girls who are staying in my home. I'm saving them because of FGM. They were running because of FGM. They don't want to go FGM. So when I was talking like this, I'm a mother of maybe 10 children. Mine is 5 and the others is 5. And I am happy when I was saved the girl from Fgm. You know, in our culture, community of Pokot, when we say they call, a girl or a woman is not a person. We call it a child up to death. So they don't have their rights. They don't know their rights in our community because they were pastoralists, high literacy in our community. And you see many girls who are dropouts. You know, the women also, they don't know their rights. They were staying as a children in home. You can't call a woman is a child. Like me, I don't have my husband died last year. I am a widow when I was talking like this. Many women were facing the same challenge like me. Many of them were fistula. Like me, I host them. Those who are fistula, really. 7 of them, which I was, 7 of them get fistula. And I called for a doctor to see them. They carried to hospital. So I myself, when I see that many people are getting fistula, but I myself, as Susan, I was very, very, very happy when I was talking like this, because I myself, when I really, I think about the way I was getting pain when they cut me. You know, what we use it when we are cutting me, they use a knife. It's not a rest. They're using a knife. And that knife chop everything. If you know type 3, and then you squeeze the legs. So that is how I am. And I am not stopping to say no to FGM. I will continue to fight, because last night, when he came to our community, I'm trying my best to say no to FGM to others or to my children. Even my boys, I told them I was facing a very painful I myself. So I don't want to see somebody to say that I want a wife which is cut, because of that I face the problem, I face it. So my 3 boys were agree, and they were supporting me. And my 2 girls, I didn't cut them, and the others who stay with me. So like me now, when I was talking like this, you know, I tell you this time that I'm a survivor, really survivor. And when I was walking, I have a problem. I'm not all right. I was having a problem in my leg because of, you know, the scar is something very, I don't know how to say. When a scar, it was in your body, even when you are staying with other people. For me, for 5 children, when they used to cut me, the same scar, even though you are in hospital, the same scar, the doctor was cutting, the same scar. I have it 5 scars in my body. Then I am talking like this, 5, which I have it now. When I say I'm not working proper, that is the problem I have it, I myself. And really, when I sit down for long, my leg get pain because I didn't stay for long when I sit down because of the problem of FGM. And the problem of FGM, it has become even torture for first time. I get torture. I was when I get torture, I'm not hearing anything when people talking. When people are trying to tell me that this is your child, I'm not hearing because I was left out. I don't know what is going on. I was miscarriage. After 3 days, I become well known. I see the people. I talk to people, what is going wrong? I ask the people. They told me that you are miscarried last time. So that is my history as a Susan. That is the real story. And I'm not fear to say my story, even anywhere, because I'm champion to say no to FGM. And I'm experienced the FGM. I have 5 scars. People were not agree when I say I have 5 scars in my body, but people who knows the way I went FGM, they will agree.
Thank
5
you,
scars in
Susan.
my body. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your courage to talk to us and tell us about your pain. I just want to make sure that everyone follow through, that it was her last pregnancy delivery was at the hospital, and if it wasn't because that she actually managed to deliver in the hospital, she would have been stricken also with fistula, and that is when she dislocated her hip, and that's the pain she carries thus far. I wanted you to, Susan, talk about, you indeed are a champion and we're so proud of you. I want you to also say a few words about what you're doing in the pastoral community, the radio ad that you ran and the work you did and you continue doing to bring awareness to the pastoral community to a point that, to my knowledge, none of them knew it's illegal in Kenya to do FGM. Susan, speak a few minutes perhaps to the work you did with the community. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. In community, I was, as a pastoralist person, I try to synthesize the community in my experience, to tell them about FGM, to talk to them, to talk to women, men, and also boys to girls. That is a pastorally people. Even through radio, I was trying to talk through radio, and I managed, I think they reached for 5,000 people that time. So in a pastoralist, really, pastoralist people, and when they were moving to Uganda and Kenya, I am on the hotspot area. I was in Uganda and Kenya. So the pastoral, when I talk to pastoralists, I managed to wear the way the pastoralists were wearing when I was talking to the community. If they were wearing a full dress, I was wearing, so that I can also to adapt what is going on in the community. But in my awareness, I do so.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. It's again, it's a privilege to know you. It's a privilege to work with you. You are a champion, and so many like you that are helping you and supporting you there to speak up against FGM. Thank you. I believe that we had some questions that were also some were answered right on the spot. And thank you, Linda. I know that you asked a question about whether we have had the talk about the UN torture laws, and yes, we actually do. Part of our training for the community as well as the children is indeed talking about the rights, the girls' rights, and their human rights and their own rights. And also we bring children welfare services to the fold. They are the one that actually take the responsibility to speak with the parents and bring them awareness that their responsibility is to take care of their children. And also we have begun, as this book came out, let me just share the screen for one moment. We have begun sharing this, the book that's called I Belong to Me. This was published by African Union not long ago, and it is basically bringing not only the UN charters, both on rights of child, rights of girls, and human rights, as well as the AU to the whole processes. We have shared with our teams in the region, and they are actually using it as a part of their educational tools. I know that Heather, you answered the question about child maternal mortality. You answered that. I just want to make sure we have covered that.
I'm just wondering, I'm Linda here. I'm just wondering if I could just, I want ask, I guess, more specifically around whether girls are taught that FGM is a form of torture. You know, I noticed that Susan mentioned torture because naming torture for children, I think, is important, especially when they're so young. And I put that little booklet in there for the children and human rights when they're a child version of it. I just wondered if it was named as torture for them. That was my main question, I guess, because the naming is so important.
We talked with various ages of the children, and my experience has been that yes, call the spade spade, but I'm not so sure when we talk to a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, we could easily reference a torture. We can talk about the pain that they experience and so on, versus using the actual word torture. We have worked very closely with the community to just make sure that we use the terms that are easily convertible for them, and they can easily address it without creating much of anxiety within their communities. But thank you for asking the question. Is there any other question that we haven't sort of fielded in the chat, or if you just raise your hand, perhaps we can see if you're missing any question. Well, I think it is wonderful that we have come together. I see Susan Ariku. She is one of our leaders in the region. And Susan, do you have anything to add on to what thus far we heard from our champion survivor, and anything about the programs you're doing there?
I don't. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is true what Susanna said. In fact, I'm so grateful about whatever she has said. My experience in Korea is actually what she has said. There is that need to sensitize the girls and women on their rights. Women is like they are timid, and men have taken advantage of women in the society. I heard you last time when you were talking, we are trying to engage this barbaric culture truly need to support Susan, what she has said, empower and these girls to know their rights. We can do is to ensure these girls go to school. And I've noticed the girls who have gone to school, they tend to refuse what they're doing. And the way the Last Mile is doing it is the best. Empowering the community, using different field officers, just like the Susan is doing it, being involved and engaging these parents. That is the best way we can do it. We need to. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your words of wisdom. Yes, you're trying to include the whole community and give the girls a voice. So hopefully we will continue doing that throughout the weeks that we're working with you. I want to ask the speakers if they have any final wisdom that they want to share with us. Heather?
No, just it's my privilege to be part of the panel. Thank you, Susan, for your courage. And I really believe in good data and sharing data and community ownership of data. I think we can really move hearts and minds through the important stories and also data to address the issue of FGM. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Cheryl?
Well, I too want to, am I unmuted? Yes. I too just want to thank Susan. As I said before, without this kind of courage, and of course, without shaming victims who don't have the courage, certainly understand that feeling also, but Susan's story is what moves people. And the data, thank you, Last Mile for Development and Heather and Mahnaz. We can't do any of this work alone. So it's the data, it's the teeth of the law, it's the voices of the survivors like Susan, above all, that will move us towards a different world. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Cheryl. Susan, we need to unmute Susan, our champion, to say the last word, please.
Okay, thank you. I can say as a champion for ending FGM with the Last Mile project, okay, I will be championing, and I need support for trainings, the way you are supporting. I work as my best. I do my best in synthesizing the community or training the community, boys and girls, to know their rights, and women also to know their rights, even boys and girls. Even also the last word, I want to thank you for supporting us as a Last Mile for trainings for girls and almost the women and the community last time, and radio too. So I say thank you, and I will try my best as a champion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for championing the cause. You see that all of us here and everybody on the chat, they're all supporting you, and we're all behind you to make sure that your voice reaches all those girls that have not been cut and all those women that have been cut, and they can find their voice through you. Thank you very much. With this, I want to thank all the participants for joining us from various parts of the world, my fellow esteemed speaker, and our tech team, Moede on the other side, and all the hard workers that are on the field day in, day out, and they're trying to protect the rights of the girls and speak to them about what they can achieve. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.